We live in an era of unprecedented achievements. Technological advancement, instant communication, and the multitude of available opportunities suggest a world filled with freedom and choice. Yet, beneath this promising surface, a growing number of individuals feel cornered, exhausted, and lost. The so-called rat race, a metaphor for the relentless pursuit of status, money, and security, is more than a social phenomenon. It is a psychological construct deeply rooted in our belief systems. The paradox lies in the fact that we are both prisoners and jailers of this condition. This essay explores how the human mind constructs, sustains, and can eventually overcome this cycle of psychological imprisonment. The rat race is a term popularized through criticism of the capitalist system, especially in the corporate context. It describes a way of life where individuals work incessantly, driven by the promise of future rewards, financial stability, recognition, happiness that never seem to fully materialize. This dynamic creates an endless cycle of effort and frustration, where the finish line is always beyond the horizon. However, the rat race is not limited to the corporate world. It is present in personal relationships, on social media, in the education system, and even in personal projects. In all these contexts, the pattern is the same: a relentless pursuit of external validation that turns the human being into a chronic competitor. From childhood, we are conditioned to believe that our worth is tied to productivity and measurable success. School rewards grades. Parents reward model behavior. Society rewards visible achievements. Gradually, we internalize the idea that being accepted and loved depends on our ability to meet external standards. This conditioning is not inherently malicious. It stems from humanity's attempt to create social order and ensure survival. However, when taken to the extreme, it turns us into slaves to others' expectations. We begin living according to an invisible script whose rules we rarely question. At this point, the mind has already laid the foundations of the prison. Psychological imprisonment is often invisible. It lacks physical bars but manifests as fear, anxiety, guilt, and insecurity. The mind clings to narratives such as, "I need to be better than others to be valued. If I'm not productive, I don't deserve rest. I'll only be happy when I achieve a certain goal." These beliefs become mental algorithms that govern our decisions, emotions, and even our identity. At this stage, the individual no longer needs an external system of oppression. They themselves become the executor of their imprisonment. Beyond being a prisoner, the mind also becomes the jailer. This occurs when it reinforces internal control mechanisms: excessive self-demand, constant comparison with others, sabotage of leisure moments, and resistance to change. The jailer mind watches, judges, and punishes. When we consider leaving the script, quitting a toxic job, changing our lifestyle, challenging conventions, it whispers fears of failure, rejection, and loss. Thus, we keep the bars firmly in place. The internal jailer is fed by ancestral fears: the fear of social exclusion, the symbolic death that comes with failure, the sense of uselessness. These fears, though not always conscious, dictate behaviors and shape realities. One of the cruelest aspects of the rat race is the illusion of control. We believe that by working more, studying more, planning more, we will gain freedom. But ironically, the more we try to control, the more we imprison ourselves. Self-sabotage emerges as a paradox of the mind. In search of perfection and absolute control, we procrastinate, avoid risks, and remain in comfort zones that, though familiar, are barren. The desire for control becomes a psychological prison. How can we escape this cycle? The first step is to recognize the paradox. We are prisoners of our own thoughts, but we also hold the key to liberation. The escape does not come through external revolutions, but through internal revolutions of consciousness. Self-knowledge is the first tool of emancipation. Questioning beliefs, observing patterns, understanding the origins of fears and desires. Meditation, therapy, reflective writing, and engaging with humanist and spiritual philosophies are possible paths. Liberating oneself requires the courage to face the discomfort of not knowing, not controlling, not pleasing. It is a journey that involves accepting the imperfect, the uncertain, and the present. A mind that frees itself from psychological imprisonment no longer needs to compete. It recognizes that human worth is intrinsic and does not depend on comparison. It abandons the quest for external validation and learns to be nourished by authentic experiences. This inner freedom allows the individual to redefine success, pleasure, and purpose. It also enables the creation of more genuine relationships based on empathy rather than utility. Work ceases to be an obligation and becomes expression. A society made up of free individuals tends to reproduce healthier systems. The culture of performance gives way to the culture of presence. Consumerism loses strength in the face of conscious minimalism. Social structures begin to reflect values of authenticity, collaboration, and well-being. However, this transformation is gradual and requires that each individual take responsibility for their own freedom. The collective mind is an extension of the individual mind, and the liberation of one contributes to the liberation of many. The rat race is not just a trap of the modern world. It is a prison built and maintained by the human mind itself. We are prisoners of beliefs, fears, and conditioning. But we are also the jailers who reinforce and maintain those bars. The good news is that, unlike physical prisons, this internal prison can be dismantled from within. It requires vigilance, awareness, and courage. By breaking away from the logic of scarcity, comparison, and external validation, we create space for a freer, fuller, and more meaningful existence. After all, when we realize that the key has always been in our hands, the prison becomes unnecessary, and the prisoner becomes the creator.